The stars were calm when the warning came. The Terran Corvette Resolute was on patrol at the edge of the Helios corridor, a lonely dot of steel against the endless night. It was not a great ship. It was not a mighty battleship like those in the old stories. It was small, fragile, and almost forgettable. 100 souls crewed her. 100 hearts beat within her thin walls, trusting the little ship to keep them alive in the cold of space. For weeks, their patrol had been routine. Scan the lanes, check for pirates, send reports, and move on. Nothing dangerous. Nothing heroic. Just another quiet watch on the rim of civilization. But war does not knock politely when it comes. It arrives suddenly, shattering the peace. The message hit them like thunder. It was not a coded military signal. It was raw, broken, and full of fear. The desperate voices of the Thaleri refugees screamed over the comms. Their home system was burning. Cathar warships, cruel, merciless hunters, were sweeping through colonies, leaving only fire and chains behind. Cities had fallen, defenses shattered, families fled with nothing but the clothes on their backs. The crew of the Resolute listened in silence. They could hear children crying in the background of the transmissions. They could hear the panic of people begging for someone, anyone, to come. The galaxy was vast, and yet at that moment it felt terribly empty. Commander Elias Hale stood at the center of the bridge. His eyes were locked on the glowing screen as the words scrolled across, requesting aid. Immediate danger. Civilian transports fleeing. Coordinates attached. His officers looked at him. No one spoke, but the weight of their thoughts was clear. The Resolute was one ship. One tiny ship against a storm. Lieutenant Carter, the helmsman, finally broke the silence. His voice trembled. "Sir, it's a trap if we go. Even if it's not, we can't fight a whole fleet. We'd be throwing ourselves into fire." The room was heavy. Everyone knew the truth. Logic said to wait, to send the coordinates up the chain, to let the admirals debate and the politicians argue until the galaxy made up its mind. That was the safe path, the smart path. But Hale did not move toward the comms console. He turned slowly, eyes sweeping across his crew. Their uniforms were standard. Their faces young and tired, but in them he saw something stronger than fear. He saw the same stubborn flame that had carried humanity through centuries of struggle. "We are not the largest ship," Hale said quietly. His voice was calm, but every word carried steel. "We are not the strongest, but we are here. And they are not asking us for victory. They are asking us to stand between them and the fire, long enough for them to escape." No one spoke against him. They did not need to. In that moment the decision was made. Not by one man, but by 100. The ship turned. Engines hummed, pushing the Corvette toward the coordinates. The stars shifted, sliding across the black canopy of space as the Resolute set its course for danger. As the hours passed, the bridge lights dimmed to battle readiness. Shields were primed, weapons armed, hull integrity reinforced by the engineers. The ship that had been just a lonely patrol vessel now became something more. A shield, a wall, a promise. The crew did not laugh or chat as they prepared. They worked with quiet hands, their thoughts heavy. Some whispered prayers. Some wrote short messages to families they might never see again. Others simply sat in silence, staring at the stars, trying to find courage in their endless light. The first sensor pings came hours later. The enemy. Red icons filled the tactical display one after another until the screen seemed to drown in them. Cathar ships. Cruisers, destroyers, frigates. 20 at least. Maybe more hiding in the dark. Their formation spread wide, hunting the weak and defenseless. The helmsman swallowed hard. His voice was small, almost childlike. "Sir, 20 ships. Against us." Commander Hale did not look away from the screen. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold, but his voice was steady. "Then we will show them what one Terran ship can do." Behind them, on long-range sensors, they could already see the blips of the fleeing Thaliri transports. Slow, battered, full of desperate souls. They would never outrun the Cathar without someone holding the line, and so the Resolute moved forward. It was not a giant. It was not a legend. It was only one ship. But in its steel heart it carried something no empire, no invader, no darkness could ever measure. It carried the will to stand. The battle had not yet begun, but the galaxy would remember this moment. Because here at the edge of the Helios corridor, a single Terran Corvette chose to fight the impossible. Not for glory, not for conquest, but because somebody had to. The Resolute drifted silently at the edge of the corridor, waiting. The darkness felt heavier than usual, like the stars themselves were holding their breath. Every man and woman aboard the Corvette could feel it. The approach of the storm. The crew had trained for combat, of course. Every officer in the Terran Navy knew their drills. But drills were not the same as facing 20 enemy warships. The thought of it gnawed at their courage. Down in engineering, grease-stained hands worked quickly, rerouting power to the shields. The gunners in their small compartments checked and rechecked ammunition, whispering to themselves as if the machines could hear. In the med bay, the doctor laid out bandages and tools, her face pale. She knew she would soon be overwhelmed. On the bridge, silence ruled. Only the hum of consoles and the quiet voices of the sensor crew filled the air. Then came the call, contact. Multiple signatures. They're here. The screen lit up. Red icons filled the display again, but this time they were closer, clearer. The Cathar had arrived. The enemy ships cut through the void like blades. Cruisers shaped like jagged claws. Destroyers with cruel spiked hulls. Their engines burned with an ugly crimson glow, painting the blackness behind them with red light. They did not come quietly. They came with arrogance, with the confidence of predators. Lieutenant Carter whispered under his breath. God help us, Commander Hale did not flinch. He stood with his hands behind his back, watching the display as the swarm spread wider. Their formation was deliberate, like wolves surrounding prey. He understood their strategy immediately. They would box in the refugees, slaughter them, then turn to finish the lone Terran ship. But they had not counted on the Resolute. Helm, Hale said firmly. Bring us forward. Intercept course. We'll meet them head on. The helmsman turned, his face pale. Sir, it means they will see us first. And if they want the refugees, they will have to go through us, no one argued. Slowly, the Resolute turned its nose toward the oncoming fleet. The engines flared, propelling the little Corvette into the jaws of the enemy. The crew felt it in their bones. The weight of standing between life and death. The Cathar fleet outnumbered them, outgunned them, outweighed them. But the Terrans had something else. Something the Cathar did not understand. They had chosen to fight. As the distance closed, the first enemy transmission broke across the comms. A deep hissing voice filled the bridge. "Terran vessel, you are alone. Step aside and you may live. Resist and you will die screaming. Your blood will paint the stars." A silence followed. The crew waited for their commander's reply. Hale's voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. "Terran vessels do not step aside. You want them? You'll have to kill us first." The channel cut. A murmur of courage rippled across the bridge. The crew straightened in their chairs. If their captain was unafraid, then neither would they be. The range shrank. 40,000 kilometers, 30, 20. The sensors screamed as the enemy weapons charged. The air on the bridge felt heavy, every breath drawn with effort. Fingers trembled over consoles. Hearts beat like drums. "Enemy opening fire," shouted Tactical. The first barrage came like a storm. Dozens of plasma torpedoes streaked through the void, glowing like burning suns. The Resolute's shields flared bright as the impacts shook the hull. The sound was thunder echoing through every deck. Lights flickered. Sparks showered from a console. "Forward shields holding," the engineer cried. "Return fire," Hale ordered. His voice was iron. The Corvette spat back. Railguns roared, hurling slugs at impossible speed. The first Cathar frigate never saw it coming. The projectiles punched straight through its armor, tearing the ship apart in a violent bloom of flame and debris. A cheer broke from the gunners. One enemy down, 19 to go. But there was no time to celebrate. More torpedoes screamed in. The Resolute rolled hard to avoid them, but two struck the flank, sending the ship spinning. Crew members were thrown from their stations. Painful cries filled the bridge. "Starboard shields down to 60%. Someone shouted. Hale gripped the railing. "Steady, keep firing." Again the Corvette's weapons barked. Again another enemy ship fell, torn apart in a burst of molten metal. Against all odds, the little ship had drawn blood twice. The Cathar began to tighten their formation, angry now, circling closer. Their voices hissed again over the comms, full of fury. "Terrans, you will suffer for this insult. We will tear your ship apart piece by piece," but the crew of the Resolute only fought harder. Down in engineering, men and women bled from burns as they rerouted power by hand. In the gunnery bays, operators screamed with effort as they kept the cannons firing. even as heat seared their consoles. In medbay, the doctor's hands shook as she worked, the screams of the wounded ringing in her ears. The Corvette was not unscathed. Hull plating peeled, fires burned. The shields flickered dangerously low. But still it fought. Still it refused to bow. The first clash was not the end. It was only the beginning. And though the enemy numbered 20, and the Resolute was 1, the galaxy had already been shown something new. For the first time, the Cathar fleet knew what it was to bleed at the hands of a single Terran ship. And the crew of the Resolute knew something too. They were not just holding the line. They were proving that humanity would not break. Not here. Not now, not ever. The first clash had ended, but the battle was far from over. The Resolute floated scarred but unbroken, her shields flickering like dying embers, her hull scored with burning wounds. On the screens the enemy swarm circled closer, furious at losing 2 of their ships to a lone Terran Corvette. The crew worked quickly, their hands blistered, their hearts racing. Sparks showered across the bridge. Smoke drifted from overloaded panels. Every station was alive with shouts. Yet through the chaos, Commander Hale's voice carried steady and calm. Focus fire. Pick your targets. We make them pay for every inch. The gunners answered with tired but determined voices. Railguns thundered again, streaking across the void with lines of fire. A Cathar destroyer shuddered under the barrage, pieces breaking away before a final slug tore through its core. The ship exploded in silence, its burning wreckage drifting into the dark. A cheer rose from the gunnery stations, but it was short-lived. More enemy ships pushed forward. Plasma torpedoes rained down. The Resolute twisted and rolled, but it could not avoid them all. Direct hit, aft section, an officer cried. Engineering Bay 3 is gone. The deck shook violently. A fire roared to life below, and for a moment the lights dimmed as if the ship itself was gasping for breath. Still, the Resolute fought back. The medbay filled with smoke and screams. Men and women staggered in, their bodies burned, their uniforms torn. The doctor's hands moved faster than thought, blood covering her gloves. There was no time to grieve, no time to rest. Every second mattered. Back on the bridge, Hale's eyes remained locked on the tactical display. He could see the red swarm pressing tighter, like a pack of wolves snapping at a wounded animal. They wanted to crush him slowly, savoring the kill. But Hale would not give them the chance. "Bring us about," he ordered. "Full thrust. Put us between them and the transports again." The helmsman obeyed, though sweat dripped down his brow. The ship lurched forward, groaning as if it were alive, forcing itself to shield the helpless civilians fleeing in the distance. The enemy responded with another barrage. The hull screamed as armor peeled away. A console on the bridge exploded, sending an officer flying. Smoke filled the air, stinging eyes and throats. "Forward shields are gone," the engineer shouted, coughing. "Then we fight without them," Hale said firmly. The Corvette charged like a wounded beast refusing to die. Its guns blazed again, slamming into another frigate. The enemy ship split in half, drifting apart in a shower of fire. The crew cheered again, louder this time. Their voices were hoarse, but their spirits rose with every kill. For a heartbeat, the impossible seemed possible, but the Cathar fleet was relentless. 3 ships surrounded the Resolute, pouring fire into her exposed sides. Explosions ripped through the decks. Alarms wailed. "Casualties in decks 5 and 6. A voice cried, "We're losing pressure in the starboard hull." "Seal the bulkheads." The crew scrambled, sealing doors, dragging the wounded to safety. Every corridor became a battlefield. Every soul fighting not just the enemy but the ship itself, as if it were determined to tear apart under the strain. And yet, through the chaos there was no surrender. In the gunnery bay, a young ensign's hands shook as he aimed the last railgun battery. His console sparked, burning his arms, but he refused to let go. He screamed in pain as he fired, and the shot struck true. Another Cathar ship shattered into wreckage. Tears streamed down his soot-stained face, but he smiled. "Got them," he whispered before collapsing to the floor. On the bridge, Hale saw the kill registered. His heart ached for the cost, but his voice remained strong. "That's 4 down. Keep firing." The enemy, furious now, pressed harder. Their leader's voice hissed once more over the comms, dripping venom. "Terran, you are nothing. You cannot win. You cannot survive. Why do you resist?" Hale leaned over the console, his face streaked with smoke and blood. His reply was steady, almost quiet. "Because they need us to." He cut the channel. The crew heard those words and something inside them burned brighter. They were exhausted, wounded, bleeding. But they were Terrans. And Terrans did not break. The battle raged on. Fires burned, alarms screamed, but the Resolute still lived. Against 20 ships it had already taken 4. Against overwhelming odds it had refused to retreat. The first blood had been drawn and the message was clear. Humanity was not prey. Not today. Not ever. The battle dragged on like a nightmare that would not end. The Resolute was bleeding. Hull plates were torn away, leaving jagged scars. Fire burned along the decks. The once proud Terran Corvette now looked like a wounded animal. But it still moved, still fought, still defied the odds. Inside, the crew worked with hands blistered and eyes red from smoke. The air smelled of burning metal and blood. Every corridor echoed with alarms and the cries of the injured. On the bridge, Commander Hale stood tall, though his uniform was torn and blood seeped from a gash along his side. His voice never wavered. Report. Shields are gone, sir. Weapons at 40%. Hull breach in the lower decks. Casualties rising. Medbay overflowing. Engines running hot. We might lose thrust if we push harder. Each report was like a knife in the heart. But Hale only nodded. Understood. Hold the line. The enemy circled closer now. 15 ships remained, spitting fire into the Corvette's fragile frame. The Cathar wanted to crush the little Terran slowly, savoring its death. They poured barrage after barrage into the Resolute, waiting for the final crack that would break it. But the ship did not break. The crew fought with every ounce of strength. Engineers patched holes with scraps of metal, their hands bleeding from sharp edges. Gunners reloaded cannons with burns across their arms. Medics dragged bodies through smoke-filled halls, refusing to rest. They were tired beyond words. Some could barely stand, but still they fought. Because surrender was not an option. A sudden impact rocked the ship. Sparks exploded across the bridge. A console shattered and Lieutenant Carter, the helmsman, fell to the floor. Blood pooled beneath him. Hale rushed to his side, but Carter's eyes were already fading. His lips moved weakly. "Sir, did we buy them time?" Hale squeezed his shoulder, his voice breaking for the first time. "Yes, Lieutenant. You did." Carter's hand went limp. The bridge was silent for a moment. Grief weighed heavy, but there was no time to mourn. Hale stood again, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. "Take the helm," he ordered another officer. "We keep fighting." And so they did. Another railgun volley struck true, ripping through an enemy cruiser. The explosion lit up the battlefield, a flare of defiance in the endless dark. But the price was heavy. Another Cathar barrage slammed into the Corvette, tearing open the starboard side. Alarms screamed. The vacuum of space roared as it tried to claim more lives. Bulkheads slammed shut, sealing survivors inside. In those sealed corridors, men and women knew they would not be rescued. The intercom crackled with Hale's voice. "Your sacrifice is seen. Hold strong. Humanity remembers." The trapped crew saluted their unseen captain, tears streaming down their faces. Then the flames claimed them. The bridge shook again. The tactical officer cried out, "We can't take much more, sir." Hale's voice was harsh but steady. "We don't need to take much more. We only need to hold a little longer." The crew clung to those words. They clung to the thought of the refugees fleeing behind them, still alive because the Resolute stood its ground. Another enemy message broke through the comms. A cruel hissing voice filled the bridge. "Terran ship, enough. You have fought well, but you are broken. Surrender, and your deaths will be merciful." The crew looked to their captain. He leaned toward the comms, his voice calm but burning with iron. "Mercy?" he said. "You know nothing of mercy. And Terrans do not surrender." He cut the line. The crew straightened, fire in their eyes once more. They were beaten, bloody, half dead but unbroken. Hours passed like lifetimes. The Corvette staggered, her engines coughing, her hull cracked. But every time the enemy came close, the little ship answered with fire. And every time another enemy ship fell. At last only 3 Cathar vessels remained, circling like vultures around the dying Corvette. The bridge was a haze of smoke and blood. The crew barely stood at their stations, some leaning on consoles, others propping each other up. The medbay was full beyond capacity. The engineers had run out of spare parts long ago. The ship was dying. The crew knew it. Hale knew it. But they had held the line. As the enemy circled for the kill, Hale raised his chin, blood running down his cheek. his voice strong one last time. "We have done our duty. If this is the end, then we meet it standing. All hands prepare for final action." The crew saluted. Some cried. Some smiled through their tears. But none faltered. The Resolute, broken but defiant, turned its guns toward the enemy once more. It had reached its breaking point, but it would not break. The battlefield was a graveyard of fire and broken steel. Wrecks of Cathar ships drifted in silence, their hulks glowing like dying embers against the black. But still 3 enemy warships remained, circling like vultures around the Resolute. The Terran Corvette was barely holding together. Whole sections were gone, torn into vacuum. Fires raged unchecked, painting the halls with smoke. The hum of the engines was no longer steady, but a sickly cough. The ship was bleeding out just like her crew. On the bridge, men and women leaned on their consoles, their faces pale with exhaustion. Bandages stained red wrapped around arms and heads. They were alive, but just barely. The med bay had overflowed. The doctor and her staff worked on the floor now, kneeling beside bodies laid out in rows. Some still groaned. Some were silent forever. Commander Hale stood at the center, gripping the railing to keep himself upright. His side was soaked in blood, but he ignored the pain. His eyes were locked on the enemy ships. They were closing in. This time there would be no escape. The comms crackled again. The Cathar leader's voice hissed like venom. "Terran, this is your end. Your ship is broken, your crew dying. Surrender, and I may spare a few of you as slaves." The words slithered across the bridge like poison. For a moment silence hung heavy. The crew looked to their captain. His face was pale, his jaw tight, but his eyes blazed. He leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "Slaves? You don't know Terrans at all. We are free until the last breath." He cut the channel. A murmur ran through the crew. Tired, broken, but unbowed, they found strength in their captain's words. Then Hale turned to them. His expression was calm, almost gentle. "We can't outlast them. Not anymore. Our weapons are nearly gone. Our shields are dust. But we still have one weapon left." The crew watched, silent. "Our ship," he said. His voice was iron now. "We'll ram them. If this is the end, then we'll end it on our terms. We'll take them with us." The word struck deep. Some gasped. Some cried. but no one refused. Every eye on the bridge met his and every head nodded. "Aye, sir," said the helmsman quietly. The engines screamed as the Resolute turned toward the nearest Cathar cruiser. Flames trailed from its battered frame, but it surged forward with new purpose. The enemy realized too late what was happening. Their formation wavered. Plasma fire lanced out, hammering the Corvette, tearing at its already broken hull. Bulkheads collapsed. Explosions shook the decks. Still, the Resolute pushed on. In engineering, the last surviving crew poured everything into the engines. They overrode safeties, fed power directly from the life support grid. Sparks burned their faces, but they didn't stop. The ship roared forward faster. On the bridge, the distance to the enemy ship ticked down. 50,000 kilometers. 40,000, 30,000, the helmsman whispered, voice shaking. Impact in 1 minute. The crew was silent. Some prayed softly. Some whispered names of loved ones. Others stared ahead with tears in their eyes. Hale stood at the center, his hand still gripping the railing. He thought of Earth, of oceans under sunlight, of forests in the wind, of cities alive with laughter. He thought of the Thaliri refugees still fleeing, alive because his ship had stood. He thought of his crew, broken but unyielding, who had given everything without question. And he smiled. The enemy fired again. Another explosion tore through the aft section. The ship groaned, lights flickered, but still it flew. 20,000 kilometers, cried the tactical officer. The Cathar cruiser grew larger on the screen, its jagged hull gleaming red in the light of its engines. The crew could see it clearly now, could almost touch it. 10,000 kilometers. The ship shook violently. An explosion ripped across the bridge, throwing men and women to the floor. Hale pulled himself up, coughing blood, his eyes still locked forward. 5,000. The enemy panicked. Their cruiser tried to turn away, but too late. The Resolute was coming like a spear of fire, unstoppable. The helmsman, his face streaked with soot and tears, whispered, "For Earth." The bridge was silent, hearts pounding, waiting for the end. The Resolute, one small Terran Corvette, hurled itself at the enemy with all the fury of its dying soul. The Resolute raced forward like a burning arrow in the dark. Every deck rattled with strain. Every bulkhead screamed against the weight of what the crew was forcing it to do. The Corvette was no longer just a ship. It was a blade forged from sacrifice and desperation. The Cathar cruiser filled the forward screen, its monstrous hull bristling with weapons. The alien ship was still firing, but the Terran Corvette refused to fall. Piece by piece she burned, yet she still cut through the void like a warrior with fire in her veins. On the bridge, silence reigned. The crew's voices were gone now. There were no more orders, no more chatter, no more cries of fear. Only the sound of heavy breathing, the low hum of broken consoles, and the distant roar of flames eating the ship alive. The tactical officer clutched his console, his voice raw. 2,000 kilometers. Closing fast, the enemy ship loomed before them, massive and terrifying. It was bigger than cities, larger than mountains, armed with enough firepower to burn whole planets. Against such a monster, the Resolute was only an insect. And yet the insect had teeth. In engineering, the last of the engineers worked until their hands were blistered and bleeding. The engine core was cracked, leaking radiation, but they fed it anyway, pouring their own lives into the drive. They knew they would not see Earth again. They would never breathe real air or walk under a sun. Their only gift now was to keep the ship alive for a few more seconds. "Cores at maximum," shouted one, his voice drowned by the scream of machinery. "She won't last long." "Neither will we," another whispered before pushing the controls one final time. The ship surged faster. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. The Resolute was ready to die. On the bridge, Commander Hale gripped the railing with bloodied hands. His body was weak, his wounds burning, but his eyes were steady. He thought of the Thaliri convoy, now far away, safe because of them. He thought of the stars of home. He thought of the oath he had sworn, to defend humanity no matter the cost. The helmsman's voice broke the silence. 1,000 kilometers. The crew tightened their grips. The enemy cruiser filled every inch of the screen now. Its weapons still flashed, but there was fear in its movements, panic in its turns. They knew what the Terrans were about to do. Hale lifted his head. His voice was soft, but it carried. "You've all done enough. More than enough. Whatever happens. You have made Earth proud." Some smiled through tears. Others whispered prayers. They all braced for the impact that would end them. The distance dropped. 800 kilometers. 400, and then the void itself shook. Out of hyperspace, blue light tore open across the battlefield. The fabric of space ripped apart, and through it came ships, hundreds of them. Sleek Terran warships, engines blazing, weapons hot. Battle cruisers, destroyers, carriers, all flying under the banner of Earth. Reinforcements had arrived. The bridge crew froze, disbelief in their eyes. The tactical officer gasped so hard it sounded like a sob. Contacts. Multiple contacts. Terran fleet jumping in right on top of us. One by one the ships emerged like avenging angels. They dwarfed the Corvette, their guns already unleashing streams of fire. The void lit up with Terran steel and fury. The Cathar cruiser, once so certain of victory, suddenly found itself drowning in fire. Beams ripped across its hull. Missiles carved through its armor. Other Cathar ships, those still clinging to battle, were swallowed in explosions as the Terran fleet cut into them without mercy. On the Resolute's bridge, the crew stared in silence. Tears ran down soot-streaked faces. The helmsman collapsed against his console, laughing and crying at the same time. Commander Hale's grip loosened. His knees buckled, and for the first time he allowed himself to sink into the chair. His voice was weak but filled with awe. They came. The comms flared alive with a familiar Terran voice, strong and steady. Resolute, this is Admiral Karos of the 7th Fleet. Hold on, brothers and sisters. We've got you. The crew erupted. Some cheered, some sobbed openly. Against all odds, they were not alone. But the Resolute was finished. Her engines were dead, her hull broken. She drifted now, more wreck than ship, but she had done her duty. She had held the line long enough for humanity to answer. Commander Hale closed his eyes. His lips formed words barely above a whisper. Welcome, brothers. Welcome to the fight. The Terran fleet roared past them, guns blazing, tearing into the enemy with unstoppable fury. For the first time in hours, maybe days, the crew of the Resolute felt something they had thought long gone. Hope. The void burned with war. The Terran 7th Fleet unleashed its fury, and the night of space lit with fire brighter than any sun. Battleships hurled beams of energy that cut Cathar cruisers in half. Carriers released wings of strike craft. darting like angry wasps and raining destruction on their prey. The enemy, once so confident, now twisted and broke under the storm. Their ship scattered in panic, but there was no escape. Humanity had arrived, and humanity was angry. On the shattered bridge of the Resolute, the crew watched in silence. Their ship was no longer fighting, she was only drifting, broken and bleeding, but the battle continued around them, and the tide had turned. The comms were alive with Terran voices. Steady and strong, enemy cruiser down. Second wave engaged, targets locked. Protect the convoy, don't let a single alien ship through. The crew felt tears rise again. Not from fear this time, but from relief. For hours they had carried the weight of the galaxy on their shoulders, believing no one would come, and now at last, their brothers and sisters had arrived. The helmsman slumped in his chair, staring at the screen with shaking hands. We don't have to die? No, whispered the doctor, holding the hand of a wounded crewman. Not today. Commander Hale sat quietly, blood soaking his uniform, but his eyes never left the battle. The fire outside reflected in his gaze. He had given everything already, his strength, his ship, his people. But to see humanity strike back filled him with pride deeper than words. The last Cathar cruiser tried to flee, its engines burning hard. But Terran destroyers encircled it, missiles slamming into its hull until the alien ship tore apart in a blaze of fire. And then, silence. The battlefield, once filled with the screams of engines and weapons, was quiet. Wrecks of alien ships drifted slowly, cold and dead. The Terran fleet moved like giants among the ruins, securing the area, ensuring no threat remained. The Resolute floated in their shadow, a wounded hero. A voice came through the comms again. Admiral Karos. His tone was softer now, filled with respect. To the crew of the Resolute, we saw the battle logs. We know what you did. You stood when no one else could. You held the line alone against an enemy fleet. Because of you, the convoy lives. Because of you, we were able to arrive in time. Humanity owes you a debt that cannot be repaid. The bridge fell silent. Some of the crew cried openly. Others bowed their heads. Every soul felt the weight of those words. Hale forced himself to his feet. His legs shook, his vision blurred, but he stood tall. He opened the comms, his voice rough but steady. "Admiral, we are honored. But the debt is not to us. It is to those who did not survive. They gave everything so that others could live." The Admiral's voice, thick with emotion, answered, "Their names will be remembered." Across the fleet, silence spread. Thousands of Terran sailors bowed their heads in respect to the corvette that had refused to fall. Inside the Resolute, the crew felt both grief and pride. The medbay still overflowed with wounded. Many friends were gone, and the ship itself was too broken to fight again. But they had done their duty. More than that, they had written themselves into history. The helmsman whispered, voice trembling, "We were just one ship. Just one little ship." The doctor shook her head softly. "One ship was enough." Commander Hale lowered himself back into his chair, exhaustion finally pressing down on him like stone. He looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew, scarred, burned, tear-streaked, but alive. Against all odds, alive. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Get us home," he murmured. The 7th Fleet encircled the battered corvette like guardians shielding a fallen warrior. Their escorts moved into formation, and slowly together they turned toward the stars of home. Behind them, the battlefield drifted in silence, littered with the wrecks of alien ships. It was not just wreckage, it was a warning, carved into the void itself. A reminder to the galaxy that when Terrans stood together, they were unbreakable. And so the legend was born. A single Terran Corvette had held the line, and when reinforcements arrived, humanity rose like a storm. The price was high. The scars would never fade. But across the stars, from Earth to the farthest colonies, the name Resolute would be spoken with reverence, because on that day, one small ship proved the truth the galaxy would never forget. Humans do not surrender. Humans endure. Humans fight and they hold the line.